Hello and welcome to the PEX Week EU video roundtable. For this session, we've gathered three leading influential figures within process excellence to discuss and debate some of the key issues within process excellence. I'm your host and moderator, Craig Sharp, editor of PEX Network. Sadly, you won't be seeing me on screen today, or so I apologise for that. But joining us, the people that you can see on screen are Oliver Campbell, Global Head of Business Transformation, Clifford Chance LLP, George Bayer, General Manager of Process Excellence, Maersk Line, and Stuart Wood, Head of Operational Excellence at Oxford Instruments. We have 4 topics for discussion today, so we will work through each one with our panelists discussing their thoughts, ideas, inspirations and pain points before moving on to the next topic. Topics are ensuring alignment between business objectives and process excellence, change management, how to properly manage change and how to combat and preempt resistance, hearts and minds, how do you change leadership minds and sell the idea of PEX or OpEx, and finally global OpEx, how do you build internal OpEx strategies in a global organization. So starting with our first topic, ensuring alignment between business objectives and process excellence, will be Stuart.
Hi everyone, thanks very much Craig. So it's very important topic for us, something that we've had challenges with in the past. One of the techniques that we've been looking at and using for this is an X-chart policy deployment process. We found this is extremely helpful in trying to align individuals' activities to the very highest corporate level objectives. People can see precisely in their day-to-day jobs exactly how that will affect the business and align to the objectives of the company. We break the X-chart down from a global corporate level down to business unit levels, and then from the business unit levels down to the individual functional areas. No, it's a tool that other people use, but very useful for us.
I'm happy to give a view from Maersk Line. We as well struggled, like Stuart explained, we struggled in the past with ensuring alignment of the PEX direction with the overall business. We had took a hard hit beginning of this year here in the organization, where it was decision to reshuffle the PEX organization. It is now a smaller organization than it used to be, but at the same time it got centered around the strategic priorities of the liner management board. So what we have done here is that the roughly 30 people we have in the organization, they're all put on some of the strategic priorities of the liner management board to support those with the clusters, which is our multiple countries organizations across the globe. So basically we called it a stop at year end last year, reshuffled the organization beginning of this year, and made sure each of the 30 roundabout PEX resources we have is now focused on contributing to one of the strategic priorities of the board. And through that we have visible contribution of every PEX resource to what is the most strategic priorities, not in keeping the business going today, but in preparing ourselves for tomorrow. That's how we have solved it here.
Perhaps from the legal industry, I have a feeling that a lot of my answers may be similar today, and that's to say that process excellence is quite new in the legal industry. So we're one of the first firms to have a process excellence program, which means I think we are much earlier in our journey in trying to tackle some of these problems. So I recognise what Stuart and George are saying, but we're perhaps operating at a slightly higher level at the moment. Our strategy is obviously to provide excellent client service, and I think historically in the legal industry, providing good quality legal advice was assumed to be the same thing as providing excellent service to clients. But increasingly, the quality of the legal advice is taken as a given. And what we actually need to do is understand exactly what our clients want that service delivery to look like. So really understand how to package that legal advice to them, whether that's through commercial advice or legal advice that's more business focused, whether it's through better project management of the transactions that are being carried out for them. So that quite neatly fits into Lean Six Sigma process excellence concepts of understanding the voice of the customer and client and analysing the way that we work to do that. So at the very highest level, we are totally aligned to the organisation's strategy. However, I think as we evolve over time, we will come to recognise the problems that Stuart and George have already touched on, of actually translating that into something that perhaps is more meaningful for everybody.
It's often said that leadership buy-in is perhaps one of the biggest issues facing process excellence teams, and that aligning process excellence projects with executive objectives is one of the keys to that. Would you say it's the primary solution to overcoming executive buy-in, and is it the most important thing? Stuart, do you want to take it first, and then Oliver?
Okay, yeah, very happy to. I do think it's a major issue. The leadership need to see what the benefits are to the business and ultimately, I guess, to the customer. So, by and large, companies are there to make a profit, and they do that through satisfying the customer and delivering excellent products. And unless the leadership can see the work that you're doing aligns to that, then it is difficult to get their buy-in. I think lots of the lean processes or OpEx processes can be almost damaged by the obsession with tools and not focusing enough on behaviours. But I do think that in this case, using a tool such as the X chart really is useful, because it shows instantly to the senior leadership team exactly how the corporate level goals align to precisely what's happening for us right down onto the shop floor.
Oliver, what do you... Sorry, go on.
Sorry, Craig. I was going to add that I totally agree that you need to have this alignment to people's objectives. I would actually say that applies not just at the leadership level, but to any sort of element of change management. If you don't incentivize the people or disincentivize them or track or do tools like that, then you won't be aligned with the individual incentives. So that applies to leaders as it does to anyone else. Of course, the legal industry is slightly different. Clearly, we're a partnership, so we have over 600 partners. We have a mild corporate structure on top of that, but we've quite a flat hierarchy. So I actually need to ensure that I'm aligned to the objectives of all of the individual partners that we are dealing with. And I've since discovered, or one of the learnings I have in my role, is that what motivates one partner is usually, or is often not the same as the thing that motivates another partner. So exactly finding out what does motivate individual people and making sure that what you do is aligned to their personal objectives is actually very powerful and ensures that you get their buy-in and support. The commonality, if there is one, is providing excellent service to the client, the customer. So that is a starting point, but you need to refine that for each individual.
So it's an overly complex issue for you, because depending on the partner, the objectives, the goals and the aims are very different. There's a unified goal there, other than excellent service to the customer.
Exactly. So you need to tailor what you are saying to an individual person or to an individual office to make sure that you've got the proper support. And the challenges will be slightly different as well. So without that clear-cut corporate structure where you may have a small group of executives that you need to please, we have a very large group effectively of executives that I need to please. And so I need to be slightly flexible in the way that I approach that.
What I was trying to drive at with my question there, and George, perhaps you could start us with this one. On the agenda, today's agenda, we were going to put how to win executive buy-in. It's a topic that very often comes up. It's a topic that a lot of people discuss. one of the primary, if not the primary response I'm usually given in an interview is that the key to executive buy-in is aligning PEX strategy with company strategy. So for the purposes of the agenda, to provide an example, we skipped right over the initial question and decided to discuss the solution. Do you think that's perhaps what we should now be doing in the wider PEX community? Should we still be asking how to get executive buy-in, or should we take it as a given that it will be linking objectives with objectives and move the discussion further? George, what are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are that I probably want to reflect on three things here. To answer your question first, the change management part and winning executive buy-in, that obviously is a key thing that is mentioned to any major transformation, any major change projects that you plug into a company. I just had last week, I looked into the operationalizing the customer experience survey from the PEX network, and again we had the same result there, that executive buy-in, top management buy-in, top management support was listed as the #1 barrier or a success factor as well in making it happen. So that is usually indeed the #1 answer. But I tend to agree with you that if we achieve what we discussed as the first agenda item today, how to link what PEX is doing with the business objectives, with the strategy of the business, especially with the preparing for tomorrow part of the business, not necessarily running it today, but preparing for tomorrow, we should be largely there. And once you do that, and secondly then, you're able to demonstrate quickly, because you need some quick wins to keep the executives bought in, and then you need to prove on a longer term that with what PEX is doing, or OpEx, or however this is called in your organization, that you are contributing results and that these results stick so they are sustainable, then winning the executive buy-in is not that much of a challenge anymore. Usually it is the executives who make the decision to start something like PEX, Six Sigma, transformation, OpEx, or however you call it. And once you can prove that this is contributing to the business strategies, to the business objectives, that you are able to deliver results in the short term and sustainable results in the longer term, executive buy-in is not that much of an issue. What I'd like to as well talk about is, however, the change management to the middle management, which in the several organizations that I have worked for in the last about 8 years, that has typically been the change management challenge, that the advisors or the coaches, consultants, PEX people, they get it and the board gets it, but the middle management layers are not always fully bought in. And indeed, what my experience has been is to master that challenge. What we already heard from Oliver is you need to tailor the PEX projects that you are after to make them fit with the individual's objectives. You need to show to the people that what you're doing, what you're trying to achieve is relevant for them and that there is value for them in achieving their relevant strategic or business objectives. I have been running this entire year with deploying a operating system in our organization which was invented in center, but we have now deployed to basically all the clusters. Sorry, I think just lost my screen. Hopefully we'll be back in a second. Now I can see you again.
We can still see you, George.
And I can see you now again as well. So we have been deploying this to basically all the regions across the globe. Mm-hmm. And I think what has made me successful in winning the buy-in of the cluster leaders is that each deployment I took as a fresh one. I sat with them, tried to explain to them what we were trying to achieve so I could win their buy-in, that they were seeing the higher purpose of it, and how it would be beneficial for them. And if you do that consistently on the various levels of the organization, then that is really what change management is all about. It's about winning, basically making sense out of what you're trying to achieve for them. They need to understand what this is all about, why we're trying to do this, what we're trying to achieve, and what specifically they need to contribute to make it a success. And if we're able to convey that, then people will follow, people will buy in, and then the whole deployment, implementation, change exercise that you're doing becomes just the piece of cake, because people do it with you, and you are doing it on the people, you're doing it with the people.
Thank you. Stuart, Oliver, do you have any thoughts on this at all?
I think George has put it quite clearly. You're right. You need to get the buy-in at all levels. I certainly agree with the middle management argument. Yes, we see that the leadership brings you in. Often the people at the bottom really understand why and value the change, but the people in the middle fear what's happening, perhaps fear that they're losing control because there's so much contribution from the bottom, and they're used to leading rather than or managing rather than leading and coaching. So there's some skills and training required for that middle level as well.
The sequence really ought to be the why first, the what then, and then you can talk the how. If you start to jump directly into the topic, which is sort of what we have been used to in the past, talk the what and the how, and then expect the people to run, it won't happen, at least not in a sustainable manner. If you start to explain the why first, the what then, and the how thereafter, people are largely sticking to it and will do it together with you.
Oliver, you mentioned that your firm is still in the early stages of this, so I imagine the explaining the why is a great deal of what you've been doing recently.
Yes, and I agree with that. I think to just take a step back, the highest levels of management are totally bought in. It's explaining it to the terminology doesn't work well in a law firm of mid-level management, because that's probably actually our partnership that aren't in management, and certainly I wouldn't describe them as mid-level management, and they wouldn't think of themselves as such. But taking the message to them is the challenge, because perhaps they don't have the time always to focus on it or think about it. But the why is the most important thing to get across, and perhaps it's the most universal thing. I was interested in what George was saying effectively about trying to roll things out globally. Sorry, I'm noticing that I'm having equal technical problems to George by having lights in my office turn off, do not moving enough. I have to move automatically. But in taking the message to other locations, that we all have global functions, and there are differences in culture and differences in practice and differences in people's evolution of thinking. And so actually taking the message to people, if you take the answer to them, there's no way you can expect their engagement. People will be turned off immediately by that. It just doesn't work. People often think it's simple. You've done this process once, or you've done it twice in the first and second locations. You know what the common answer is, and you should just be able to get everybody else around the world simply to do the same. But unless you go back to the why, you're not going to win hearts and minds. And sometimes it can be a bit frustrating for those in the process operational excellence functions, because you probably know where this is going to go, but you have to take a step back, start with the why, let people come to their own conclusions, and almost perhaps more as a control to make sure that the solutions they come up with, the things they decide to implement, are actually the same, and therefore we achieve uniformity globally, but we don't impose it on people. We give them the structure and we support them to come to the same conclusions quite often. But you need to go back to the why, otherwise you really will struggle, I think, to try and share anything.
Okay. We've certainly moved well into the realm of change management on the agenda, so we'll I think, conclude the change management topic. Do any of you have any final thoughts on managing change, on perhaps spotting the signs of change resistance, on what can be done to ensure that that your process excellence projects don't fall down in the middle of the organization?
Typically, what I do when I introduce the change that I'm bringing to our country organizations these days, I kick it off with a session where I explain to them the why. Why are we doing this? Why am I here? What are we trying to achieve? But I spend a lot of time in this very first workshop to win their hearts and minds by asking them what they do expect from me and what they expect from the project, from the initiative, for themselves and for the company. I do as well ask them about the history, about what has made similar transactions, similar exercises successful in the past, so what have been the critical success factors, but as well, what are the things that we have to avoid by all means, because these typically things, behaviors, create roadblocks for the future. And then I ask them whether we can now enter in a sort of agreement that if we take care of these expectations, if we make sure that the way we bring the change about does properly reflect both the critical success factors as well as the obstacles mentioned by them, that we will give it a serious try. So I don't ask them to sign up for that they will be fully supportive of the change unless they have seen it in practice, but I ask them to give it a serious try to check out whether it might work. And that typically gets me over the first hurdle of obstacles. I have had a recent experience with one of the country organizations who told me up front in this very first session that they were change resistors, that they had a culture in the organization as well as in the country, a mindset of being change resistant. And because they were so open about it, I think that was already the first step to break the ice. And after 3 weeks working with them, I had the feel that they were not at all change resistors, but their hearts and minds were very open to the change that we were to bring about. And meanwhile, as they have really understood what the change is about and what it can bring to them, they're actually pulling for the change. And that's typically a situation I try to get into as soon as possible, that I'm not the one pushing the change anymore, but as soon as they start to see what's in it for them, that they start pulling me and ask for more of the same rather than me having to push it through.
I wonder actually if we could probably all guess which country you were in where you experienced that, but without going there and into stereotypes, I thought I'd add something tactical rather than strategic to it. If I turned round my camera to show you the rest of my office, you would see that I've got giant boxes of Lego, and I'm doing quite a lot of playing with Lego at the moment. But I agree with George that people don't often buy into change until they can see it in practice. And certainly the lawyer body are quite sceptical. Lawyers are trained to be sceptical of change, in fact, sceptical of anything. I'm an ex-lawyer myself, so I'm hopefully not being too stereotypical. But one of the things that we do to help people see the benefit of the change is play games with them. Once we've got past the why and once we're getting on to the change that we want them to do. And so quite often we get our lawyers or our people in business services playing with Lego, which we designed to mimic their workflow processes to some extent. They may not be perfect models, but to try and start to get that buy-in, to get people to see how to do it. We recently had lawyers making origami shapes as a task to see how they could work better together. It only takes you half an hour or something, but it can often start to break down some of the resistance that you may initially have had and start to show what the future might look like. Although I agree it's a much longer journey.
Sorry, say again,
Yeah,
Stuart?
I was just going to pick up on a point. George raised the issue of the why, and Oliver built on that, and it is so very important to get the why. But I think you have to be careful that you're looking at the why from the right position. If you're doing it from the why from the company's point of view, why the company should do it, you're not necessarily going to get the level of buy-in you want. You've got to do it from the why from the employee's point of view. We often joke about the three M's, which is from an employee's point of view, money, mates. And that's what they're interested in. What's in it for me? What's going to happen to my money? And what's going to happen to the mates around me? So from their perspective, and we try to sell it on that point of view, your working life will improve. There's no risk to your employment. There's no risk to your money. The working environment for you and your colleagues will improve. So the why has to be from their perspective, not just the company's.
I think we would all completely agree with that. And the three M's, I like that. I think I may borrow that if that's okay, Stuart.
Feel free.
And before we move on to the next topic, Oliver, can we see the Legos? Can you show us what you've been working on?
Well, so I really do have tubs of the stuff in my office. And we have, I suppose, well, I'll see you for the start of our logo there. If you give me until the end of the call, I could do the rest of our logo maybe. But,
Wonderful, fantastic. Okay, so moving on now, we've mentioned this phrase a couple of times during this discussion, hearts and minds. But what we're looking at here is how you change leadership minds. For example, if you're at a company that don't currently have a project, process excellence project or an operational excellence project, who are completely green to the topic and to the idea, how do you change executive and leadership minds in order to get sign-off perhaps for some budget or some resource? How do you begin on that journey? How do you win them over when you don't have any tangible evidence? Who would like to begin with that?
well, I suppose I can tell you our story. I'm not sure it's the only way of doing these things, but I think certainly in a conservative industry like law, things are going to move quite slowly. So things did move quite slowly in our case. Senior management's interest was piqued when they meant to meet some people who spoke about the benefits of process improvement. I think, no doubt, there was a high degree of skepticism in that, yet they saw demonstrations of it, they saw how well it had worked in manufacturing examples, and very slowly decided to dip their toe in the water, and that then became my challenge, I suppose, to prove that it actually worked. And so we did do it slowly. We started with a small budget. We started with one person. We started with what seemed like an easy project to bring benefits, and then built it up slowly from there. As we said earlier on, I actually don't think it's hugely difficult to convince the executive level management of the benefits of these sorts of things. As a starting point, you've got clients, customers, customer feedback. You may have competitors who are doing similar things. Probably your clients, certainly in our case, many of our clients were doing activities such as this and asking us whether we thought about doing the same. So the drive was certainly there. The next challenge was to prove its efficacy and then grow it, which takes us back to the conversation at the beginning. But I think certainly lawyers, but I imagine most executives are skeptical but rational. So once you start proving these things to people, then the story grows from there.
Was there any were there any terminology issues? So you mentioned you used manufacturing examples. How did that translate in a legal setting? Was there any reluctance there, or?
So I think terminology is a big part of it, and my background is as a lawyer, so I joined the team as the lawyer, I think, to bridge the external expertise in process improvement to the work of a law firm. And We don't use a lot of the terminology that you might find outside a law firm. We certainly don't use a lot of the terminology you would find in manufacturing. We rarely speak in Japanese to each other. We try and simplify it and make it amenable to the people that we are actually working with. And perhaps some of the time it took us to have the early successes was understanding exactly how to do that translation to make it work for lawyers. And the translation really is keeping it quite high level and quite straightforward. We rarely have processes with thousands of data points flowing through them. We're lucky if we can find 10 perhaps sometimes. So we often operate at quite a high level in that sense. So we're not speaking in gobbledygook to people. We're trying to speak their language. But learning that was important.
Stuart, you were going to add something there when Oliver gave us his story.
Yeah, I'm a very big fan of study tours, and I'm involved with a number of best practice programs. And we take people out to go and see it in operation at other factories and other businesses outside of our industry. So we would go into banking, we'll go into chocolate manufacture. We're actually in nanotechnology, so we're a scientific business. We would go into car industries. We'll go and visit other businesses and talk to the people that are engaged in it and listen to their stories and their benefits. And I think that's a huge way of getting people to buy in. You can paint a picture of what it's going to do to you and the benefits it will bring to the organisation. But the minute they actually see it in action, and they see the enthusiasm and the change that's happened within an organisation, that's when people start to buy it in. There's only so many, and like Oliver, we run lots of simulation exercises, including Lego, but it only covers part of it. It's when you actually go and see it in practice and you listen to people and they tell you about how their world has changed and how it's improved them. That's when we start to get buy-in from our teams.
Can I add the other really useful thing I think about those sorts of visits, because whenever our clients are interested in what we do and they have similar process excellence, I often get invited to see how they do it, and they're usually much further ahead than we are. So I leap at the chance to go on one of these study tours, as Stuart calls them, and see how they operate. But one of the most powerful things, I think, is to see other people's approaches and then challenge yourself. So you see the enthusiasm, you see the rigor, you see the benefits that they're getting from it, and certain things, particularly with our light touch, high level, early adopter approach that we perhaps have dismissed as being too manufacturing or something that couldn't work. I've come back from these study tours and thought, hang on, perhaps we should give something like that a go, and managed to find a way to make it work. So seeing how other people do it, as well as selling executives on the point, is really a good way of challenging the people doing it to make sure that they are doing the best they can.
George, are you a fan of study tours as well?
Listening to what Oliver and Stuart have reported about, two things came to my mind. One was, in the last years I have been often in a position that I was to deploy a sort of a Lean Six Sigma transformation program in a business division of an organization where the board had already given the mandate to do it, but the divisional leaders were not bought in, or would not understand why it was relevant for them. And I had indeed a specific experience where cracking that, getting them to give it a serious try, we were only given a single chance to crack that. It took me months to actually get to that opportunity. And I think how I prepared myself and used this opportunity successfully was first by reading my stakeholders carefully. So I knew what would motivate them to do the change, what would make them resist us, what would be a win for them. And I knew when the tipping point was to give it a try now, and how to win some key people in the audience over. And in that specific event that's currently on my mind, we won them over by being given the opportunity to go to an off-site meeting with them, a management leadership meeting, where we actually put them into a simulation. So we didn't talk them through lots of theory, but we directly put them into a simulation, an exercise. As Oliver said, people need to experience it themselves. So they saw it, and it made sense to them. And then at the end of that session, it was only about an hour, 1.5 session. Really, the discussion was in the room. Shall we give this a serious try? Does that apply to us? Does it make sense? And luckily, the people nodded and said, "Yeah, let's give it a try. It seems to work. We understand what this is about, and let's try it out." And of course, we over the coming weeks, we then kept it to this. Always made sure that the people would see, the senior leaders would see the benefit, what it would be for them, and so they would be willing to give it a serious try. I as well have been in a situation where we have been hosting customer events in an organization that had implemented largely lean. It was actually in data centers where they had implemented lean in our organization, and we were hosting other companies, getting visits from senior managers.
George, I'm sorry to interrupt you. There's a lot of background noise from somebody's computer.
Yeah, I think that has just disappeared. So I'll start again. Sorry for that. So we were hosting customer events, or basically events with people who were earlier on the lean journey, tried to adopt it, and we had senior managers visiting us. And it was in an IT world. And as well, we had people from various organizations, like Stuart reported. We had banks visiting us. We had even manufacturing companies visiting us from various industries, talking to the leaders who had already been through the journey, talking from them peer-to-peer, like a customer service manager talking to a customer service manager, an ops manager talking to an ops manager. That was really the convincing part, which made people leave the place excited and turn them from somebody who had only heard about it to somebody who had seen it with their own eyes, and made them believers into, hey, this could actually work. And this guy was able to talk to me from the position he had been in 2 years ago, when he was probably where I am now. So because they could make these peer connections, they felt picked up from the point these people were now, and they could then see how the future could look for them if they were following the same path. That's how I have seen that we created massive support on senior levels for such a transformation.
So we've certainly got a consensus. I think that research pays. Out of industry research, if you have no internal data, is the way to go. I did an interview with a gentleman from Velux a couple of weeks ago, who echoed what you've said, but he did also say that even so, it still takes somewhat a leap of faith on management's part. They have to believe, they have to be prepared to take the chance. Would you agree that that's also a requirement? I thought it was quite poetic. Any thoughts on a leap of faith before we move on?
You have to trust the journey. Yeah, you cannot prove it with results in your own organization before you have actually started. So you can show that others have achieved results with doing similar things, but you will typically not find an example which is from your own industry, from your own location as well.
Oliver, do you have a leap of faith before we move on?
Craig, I would add that the job of senior management is risk mitigation. And what we've been talking about is reducing that risk by demonstrating success in similar and dissimilar organizations, and getting them a chance to go and see the benefits and the opportunities. So there's always some degree of faith required, but our job is to reduce the amount of faith required, if you like, by this mitigating the risk, by demonstrating the successes, showing them that the opportunities are huge.
You're far more cool-headed than I am, Stuart. Sorry, Oliver, go on.
I don't think that nothing that's innovative is ever going to come along without a bit of risk. I agree with Stuart's risk mitigation point, but if it had been done before in your organisation, it wouldn't be new and you wouldn't be thinking about doing it. So if you want to really make an impact, you've got to take a risk, but it should be a calculated risk, and you can do your best to do your research in advance.
Okay. I think we've just about got enough time to move on to the fourth and final topic, global OpEx or global PEX. How do you build internal strategies, process strategies, OpEx strategies globally? Who would like to start us off with that?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. We've got sites all around the world, and we are looking at a global program. And what we've done from Oxford's point of view is we've developed a model of what we believe OpEx will look like for us, and a roadmap that supports that model, so only that people can go along, the different sites can go along. And we've also developed an assessment, a maturity assessment, so we can measure progress against it. But each site is going to be very different. They're starting from a different point. They could have different challenges and different issues. So each site is allowed a great deal of freedom within that model, the framework of that model, to develop their program, and we'll support them on their journey that way. So we start off with a big picture. This is where we want to get to. This is how we want to get there. This is what it will look like. Then we'll do a baseline assessment of the site, find out what level the site is at, and then develop their individual journey that will take them along our bigger picture. So we're coming at it from both angles. There's a high level view, and then there's a local site view.
How about regional legislative requirements, cultural differences between different organisations? Are these issues or perhaps challenges that you've faced?
Yes, they are. The cultural things, and I don't want to stereotype too much, but yes, I mean we've got factories around the world. Some nations are quite subservient, and they tend to do it because you told them to do it, but they're not really understanding why. They're just doing it almost to keep face, if you like. Other nations can be a little bit, can push back a little bit. So we've had a number of different styles. We've even recruited people that come from the local area with specialist skills of that area that can help us put the message across. I'm going to give it a perspective from a UK view, and that may not be appropriate for every site. So yeah, we'll work so hard to try and understand the local culture and the best way for doing it in that area. I think you have to take that into consideration.
How would you, Oliver? You mentioned you've certainly practiced law in your lifetime. How would you set about creating a global PEX strategy from a legislative perspective with various local rules and regulations? Is this something that you can do as a broad sweeping process, or is that perhaps overreaching a little?
I think it depends what level of detail you want to get into. I suppose from my position it's almost twice as complicated because our service is the service of law or the provision of legal advice. So I'm not only facing different legislative practices insofar as how they affect my colleagues in the different offices, it actually affects how they go about practicing their job and also market practice, local cultures, or whatever. So I mean, I think the most obvious way it impacts people is in relation to your various human resources policies about how you can motivate people, how you can demotivate people, and perhaps taxation for the things you might want to give them to help motivate them, and how that impacts things. And that's going to be perhaps jurisdiction specific, and you're going to need to work with people on the ground to understand what levers are available to you, both culturally and legally in that sense. But I don't think for your strategy you necessarily need to get into that level of detail, and I would imagine that the approach that Stuart talked about can operate still at a higher level, and then it's only once you get into the detail in each location that you need to consider how to fine-tune these things for your different offices. We again perhaps have another slightly different challenge on it, and it's that the lawyers in all our offices do broadly the same work, or at least similar things, and they often work together. So I can't afford not to take things on a global perspective. A large proportion of our deals are cross-border, where we have people working together from day one. So we need to work globally in that sense. But as we were saying earlier, it's not as straightforward as developing an operating model that works well in one location, particularly if that location is your largest head office location, as it's probably often going to be, and then trying to impose that on everybody else around the world. Because things that are imposed on people from head office, in my experience, are often treated even more skeptically than lawyers would treat everything else. So fine-tuning in the way that you work with people at a local level is much more important.
Okay. George, do you have any thoughts on this? I think we're going to have to begin wrapping it up now. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Quickly, I already mentioned at the beginning of this conversation that we have reorganized our PEX organization across regions. And the way we have structured it now is that we have a center team who works with the board on what the strategic priorities are that PEX shall support. We as well have 8 regional teams who are close enough to the countries to be able to make things relevant for that respective culture, for that respective part of the world. And what we as well do, we appoint leaders from this regional community to take care of specific subjects, of specific topics to drive the content as well. So for instance, of the 4 or 5 strategic priorities we have been tasked with this year, our region took the lead on one, Latin America took the lead on another subject, North America was leading another subject for global, plus the deployment in their own region. And that has been working quite effectively. So putting the regional people in has made sure that not everything that arrives in the countries is perceived as another thing out of head office that is forced on us, but has as well made sure that we can travel across a region and be close to the people and adapt the things to their needs, still making sure that what center corporate wants to achieve with it will be achieved within the various country organizations. So that's how we have tackled it. I think that has been a quite successful approach so far.
Okay, thank you. I think that's everything we have time for today.
Thank you,
so
Craig.
Oliver, George, Stuart, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for taking part in this discussion.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Oliver, did you make any progress with your Lego?
No, I'm afraid I didn't. I've still only got my one.
Oh,
I was paying too much attention.
you need a better process for that. You need a better process. Okay, well, thank you to our panelists, and thank you to our audience for joining us as well. Our panelists will be among speakers at PEX Week Europe in April of next year. For more information on the event and on their presentations, you can visit www.pexweekeurope.com. And as always, for more interviews, white papers, reports, infographics, and more, visit www.pexnetwork.com. Thank you, and